Hello everyone, this is Legionnaire/Zaba here, and today I'm bringing you a Trickster Frostblades White Wind build. This is a variant of a popular build that was popularized by BehindEyesGaming, so shout out to him and his videos on the claw version. Mine differs in that I use a dagger. There's a few more differences than that, but that is the biggest one. So if you are a new player, I would recommend you check out BehindEyesGaming video, as he is catered a bit more towards new players, explains some mechanics in his PoE that I do not, because I'm lazy, and also has a detailed leveling guide that I actually myself will be referring to as well if I decide to league start this. So I'm going to play a video and I will talk a bit more about that. I personally will not most likely be league starting this unless I make a decision 5 minutes before the league starts, like always, that I'm gonna do something else. So I will not be league starting this myself, but that is because whatever you want to league start this or not depends on what you're looking for in a build. Even though I'm not a top player, like you're not gonna see me at the top of the leaderboards and stuff, I do want a build that will let me get, as much currency and as much basically fun reserve for the rest of the league as possible. And I believe that there are builds that just do that better or are stronger at that than Frostblades is. But if you are just looking to play Frostblades, if Frostblades is a skill that you like, which I understand, I have been in love with the skill since 2.1 when it came out, so I do love this skill as well. So if that is something that is more important to you than being 5% more efficient, that you could be on a different build, it's not gonna eat you up inside, that you're not doing what you could already be doing, then yeah, this is a fine build, right? This is a very fine league starter. So it really depends on what you're looking to get out of it. Let's talk a bit about the clear speed, because you're already seeing the video here and the clear speed looks pretty good, right? Now, any leak, or not sorry, leak start, any video with Oriad's End is gonna look good, because Oriad's End, which is the 5th flask on my flask slot, is a unique bismuth flask that gives you explosion on kill, and that is all you need to clear with any skill, especially skills that have a lot of reach though, because you get more staggered explosions, so they chain easier. But any build really, um, throwing this on just gives you good clear speed. So you might think, oh, okay, so this is a fake video. Well, unfortunately, I gave the gear on the build away when I was quitting the league, so I cannot show you the actual character, and I don't have a video before I got Oriad's End, but I only got Oriad's End towards the end of this character's life. So you can definitely just run Pierce through the passive tree, which is 3 to 4 passive nodes. Excuse me, my voice is cracking a little. Or the Chain Support Gem, or Awaken Chain, Awaken Fork. I probably wouldn't run normal Fork, but there's a lot of different options, right? So Oriad's End is not the be all end all, it's just something that I had the money to spend on it and at the end of the Sanctum League, so, or when I was ending it. Bossing is something that you're looking at in front of you right now. The damage is insane. This was again at 200% more life and 42% life as energy shield Drox. So I think that is a pretty good showcase. So that was somewhere between 30 to 50 million DPS. I will talk a bit more about how much the DPS varies in just a second, but yeah, I think that this is a pretty good showcase of a build that, even though it is expensive, like I invested a lot of money into it because I loved it and I loved Sanctum, it was my favorite league ever, so I ended up playing for a lot and I ended up investing a lot of money into the build. It is money that the build made, right? So this is something that's often repeated in league starters. They need to be able to start on nothing and scale into infinity. Now, the scaling on this is not quite infinity, and I will talk about it as well, but it is high enough that you get damage like that, and that's the most damage I ever had in this game. So for me to go from, standard builds that cap out at 4 million max to go to 60 million, pretty crazy, right? So it was an experience for me, and that's why I'm sharing this build, as I am definitely in love with it. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to uncheck everything and talk a bit about the DPS first, right? So as I said, the DPS varies a lot, and it's not even just the obvious stuff, right? Like elusive. Elusive is the obvious choice because your PoB is showing you your average elusive value. And as you saw on the Drox skill, my elusive did drop off, and then I had to reapply it, or regain it, I guess. So technically, it is true that your average DPS in the big picture is based on your average elusive effect. But once you hit, excuse me, once you hit these levels of gear, where even without elusive I still have 18 million, and with flasks up you'll see it shoot up even more to like 30. At that point, any boss that doesn't have an invulnerable face will be just insta-killed, even if they spawn. Like I was doing Veritania's, where even with 200% more life and more life on the map, I was just deleting them, right? Like she didn't even fly up because I just deleted her, right? Even with the first few seconds of not invulnerability but boss armor that they get, you just get more and more damage the sooner you kill a boss. So elusive, the scaling on it is elusive. Excuse the pun, but or not really a pun, but it's elusive to calculate. Because you do technically get more than your average, because if you kill a boss in the first few seconds, you're actually getting your max effect, right? So that's just one point where it very varies, but once you reach a certain level, it feels really, really good. So that's the damage part. Now, I will go over the gear, but I will go over the gear last, because the gear is honestly not that different from the other versions that you've seen there. The biggest difference is probably Mark of the Elder. This is tech that I got from a random poster on Reddit. I apologize that I do not remember your name, but during Sanctum there was a post of a Frostblades Trickster doing Uber Maven and deleting her. That had even more damage than mine built, but I saw that he is using, or they are using Mark of the Elder. Whereas most of the claw variants I saw were using the Herald of Ice Rings, which is much bigger investment. So that's the only difference I'll mention. The rest of the gear I'll go last if you don't want super long video. I will talk about the changes from Sanctum to Crucible League now. So the biggest changes for me, technically, we could talk about the reservation, but you probably already kind of know about the reservation, right? This video is geared more towards intermediate players, and you have probably already noticed that we no longer have the Grace reservation mastery, and instead we have to pick this up. So, okay, that's one thing. But the biggest loss in my mind is the cold mastery. So there is a cold mastery, or used to be a cold mastery, that gave you 60% increased cold duration. Now you lost that. However, they did put it here, Winter's Embrace. So, okay, we didn't lose any damage. Well, we did, because we used to anoint Panopticon, which is really, really strong. Panopticon is, as you can see, 21% more damage on its own. That's insane. However, it doesn't matter how much damage you're dealing if you never hit the freeze threshold, you're not gonna get your damage, right? So the Panopticon matters less than the freeze duration. So we have to switch our Anoint to Winter's Embrace. That's a nerf. Before, when I opened the PoE on the 3.20 version, it was about 33 million DPS. After the changes I made, it's 27 before we get to flasks and different stuff. So that's a nerf to damage. It's not a horrible nerf, but it is a nerf. Then we did have some good stuff added as well. So when it comes to not just mana reservation, but mana recovery, we now have instant mana leech. 10% still, but you know, mana gained on hit is very good. Right? If you had a Gemini Claw, you basically didn't need to worry about your mana sustain at all. So having 10% instant mana leech is about, I don't remember exactly the math, I think it's like half of the implicit that the Gemini Claw has at some levels. It doesn't really matter, like it's gonna be enough because you still have the rest of the mana leech as well, which previously was enough. But now it's gonna feel even better, where you hopefully you're not gonna run into situations where, you know, the map has some reduced recovery and you know, run out of mana. So we'll see exactly how it translates. Maybe this is not worth picking up, maybe we'll still let go of this, but I do have it in the build now as I value it relatively high. And also it gives you basically life gain on hit, which is really good. So the big changes from my 3.23 that I had were addition of these two wheels. Now, let's talk about the defensive nerfs, because this build did receive some defensive nerfs. One thing that I was using that no one else was using, so I'm very angry, not salty, but you know, I'm a little angry that it's gone, is the 5% of evasion as armor. This was a mastery that you used to get on the evasion and armor mastery. Excuse me. But you no longer do. It's gone. So now we have to drop that, right? The nodes are not good enough on their own, so drop that. That is defensive nerf, means you're gonna go from dying once every 20 maps to once every 19 maps. Damage nerfs we already talked about, and now let's go over the gear. So, the most important pieces are White Wind, that is our weapon of choice. It is mostly just thematic. You can go for claws still, but at that point you can just follow someone else's build guide, right? I choose to go for White Wind because it really helps you put your foot in the door in early maps, right? When, even though it's not hard to craft the claws, there is still the fact that you have to craft them, right? Or buy them. So even though it's not hard, getting a White Wind is still easier. So it's so common that you will most likely just drop it yourself. And while a lot of people are expecting Heat Shiver rarity to change, I do not expect White Wind rarity to change. So it will most likely still be very common, and you might even just drop one yourself in Act 10. If you don't, buy it, and just make sure that you have the intelligence required to equip it. Heat Shiver, I will go over the budget setup as well that doesn't use one, just in case it's been upped in rarity and it's worth, 20 div. However, even if it is worth 20 div, the moment that you have 20 div, like if you're at 19 div and you drop a div, go and buy it straight away. It doesn't matter what the price is. It could literally be a mirror and it will be worth it. Okay, well, maybe mirror is a little overshooting it, but it could be worth, dozens and dozens of divination orbs, and it would still be worth it. It is insanely strong. It is broken beyond belief. I don't understand how it didn't get nerfed, but let's celebrate that it isn't nerfed and get it as soon as you can afford it. The second thing you get after you get a Heat Shiver is a Yoke of Suffering. This is usually also relatively cheap, but due to the popularity of this build, it might be, or this build archetype, it might be a little more expensive at league start. Div 2 div is probably still a reasonable price for it on the first few days of a league. After like week 1, I wouldn't pay more than 50C for it though. Then you get Legacy of Fury. Not much to explain here. It might look complicated, but the only thing we care about here is the Scorch. So we just scorch enemies and they're taking more elemental damage. What else is there to say? Mark of the Elder, as I explained, is an alternative to using the Herald of Ice rings. You really don't need Herald of Ice for clear, even before you get Oride's End, which you don't even have to get, by the way. But even before you get it, you don't need Herald of Ice, so I dropped it and used Mark of the Elder instead. And I'm not going to go over the rare gear, because the rare gear you can just look at in PoE yourself, and you don't really need an explanation. You just want to match the mods as close as you can, and if something you cannot afford because it's too expensive, then just delete mods from the trade request until you find something that you can afford. Simple as that. The only thing I will mention is on these gloves I have strike skills target 2 additional nearby enemies. You do not need to have 2, 1 is more than enough. This was just another thing that I did at the end of the league, or when I was quitting it, to just kind of play at min-maxing the build, even though it's not really min-max, but still, not necessary. And we'll go over the budget setup, but you will basically be using Southbound gloves instead, so you don't really even need to worry about that. And like some of these pieces of gear, you might not know how to craft, but you can still just buy them, and it doesn't really matter that much. The only thing I'll mention again, or the second thing I guess I'll mention for rare gear here, is that I recommend playing around with the implicits, with the Searing Exarch and either world implicits. I value very strongly the defensive ones, so I was using Fortify and Endurance charges. You could instead use damage ones, which is Hatred effect and increased effect of Nuncurse auras. So it's up to you. Play around with it and see what you like. I think the Endurance charge and Fortify is the best defensive option, especially now that we lost the Evasion as armor mastery. So see what you like the best. Alright. And then the unique jewels, Lethal Pride exists here for chance to deal double damage. So here's 5%, here's 5%, here's 5%. And I think I had more somewhere else, but might have changed between patches. Anyhow, you do need one of these. I'm not gonna say when you should get it, basically just when you start feeling like you're not freezing bosses anymore. You should get a Lethal Pride with at least one chance to deal double damage one. Better, the more you get, the better. But the reason it's so good, and the reason you kind of want to use stuff like diamond flasks as well, is that you really want to have. It's not a diamond flask. Okay, sorry. I'm gonna change. Where is it? Here. Okay. Diamond flasks as well is that you want to have as good crit as you can get and as good chance to deal double damage as you can get, so that you have a bigger chance of rolling both on the same roll. And that is gonna give you huge hits that will max out your ailments. It's not 100% guaranteed, right? Like you're not gonna get it on every boss, but when it does happen, it's just easy. 50% shock, longest duration freeze you can give, and just good stuff. Then the timeless jewels, I take opportunistic. Where is it? Here, pretty standard. And the Watcher's Eye is just more damage, right? So this is something like 60% more damage. You could get even a better one, but I don't know what else to say. You could get the 3-prop Watcher's Eye, but that really checks up the price, so whatever. Alright, so that's the endgame version. I do have a cluster here, but the only reason I'm using a cluster is so that I have enough jewel sockets to fit all of my jewels. Excuse me. All of my jewels. So, it doesn't really matter that much. It's not actually giving me better damage than just a skill tree. Per node, it might actually be worse. But I needed the jewel sockets. So, it's not a bad deal. But I will see that in the starter version, it's not there. So, we talked about gear. At this point, if you're an intermediate player, you can close the video and you can league start this yourself because you'll be able to scale it yourself. But if you are, let's say, new-ish but learning the skills and mechanics of Path of Exile already, and you feel confident that you'll be able to league start without too much hand-holding, I don't mean it in a bad way, but there is not really detailed notes in this POB. I'm a lazy person. If you feel like you can do it, then I'm going to spend a bit more time talking about specifically this League Start version. So this League Start version deals a lot less damage. As you can see, you're not going to enter maps with 60 million DPS. It doesn't just happen like that. However, this is 2 million without a Heat Shiver. So 2 million without a Heat Shiver is very good, because if Heat Shiver has been nerfed in rarity, right, if it's going to be 50 divinations at the start of the league, suddenly your build doesn't just suck and doesn't work, you can still play it. It's not going to be as strong, but it's still viable, right? So that is also why I really like White Wind. However, I only have this version without the Heat Shiver because a lot of people are expecting that the rarity has been nerfed. If it hasn't been nerfed and it's just a couple chaos, get it as soon as possible. And really, even if it is multiple divinations, as soon as you have, or sorry, not divinations, divine orbs, as soon as you have them, buy it. There is no, buts or ifs. This helmet is broken beyond belief. It is insanely powerful. It is overpowered in the true sense of the word, and I do not understand how it didn't get nerfed. Either way, let's enjoy that it's not nerfed, and as soon as you can afford it, buy it. The second thing you'll buy is the Yoke of Suffering. We talked about the gear already in the previous section, so you know what to buy in what order. The difference here is that you are using Southbound Gloves, as this POB is a league start, so we take the mastery for additional nearby enemies. You do eventually want to get the gloves that I have in my high budget POB, or something like them, right? And get the additional target on those gloves, so that you can save 5 passive points, which is a lot. The projectile pierce nodes are here to help you clear early as well. As I said, you can use chain instead as the skill gem, not on the skill tree. This is not really good enough value for you, but you can use the chain gem instead, or you can use fork. if you get a lucky drop and you get Awakened Fork or Awakened Chain, you can use that. The Mastery you also don't need, but I pick it up because it's nice clear speed and a little bit more damage from Polymath, which is this node. And that's really it. Like most of the other differences are just that it doesn't have the jewels, right? So you don't have the jewels allocated. So you don't get a Watcher's Eye, you don't get the Forbidden Jewels, which are expensive. You don't get any of the rare jewels, which are expensive. You sacrifice some damage to get more quality of life, let's call it. You have the chance to press spell damage is lucky. Now, even with this tree, you're already at 96%, so you actually don't need that. And you can just respec this into this, and then once you have um, even just evasion gear, you don't even have to have the suppression on it. You're capped. But that is something you have to still think about, right? That's why this is not really a beginner build, in my opinion. But I do still have this allocated so that you know to take it in the very, very early game. And yeah, that's it really. So if you have any questions, I will try to answer them. But as I said, if you are a beginner and you like the sound of this, you like what you saw in the footage, but you're not sure you'll be able to make the decisions on the fly, I highly, highly recommend you check out BehindEyesGaming video instead, which is much more tailored towards newer players. Either way though, I hope that this at least helped you find a build that you might enjoy. Frostblades is a lot of fun. This was my favorite build ever. Sanctum was my favorite league, in part thanks to me finally getting to play this build in this level of power. So I cannot recommend it enough. And either way, thank you for paying attention so far. I'll let you go now. Have a nice rest of your day and see you in Path of Exile Crucible. Bye bye.